The elevator doors opened slowly on the 32nd floor. Morning light stretched through the tall glass windows of the executive conference room and settled gently across the polished wooden table. People were already seated inside. Men in suits. 2 security officers standing near the wall. And at the center of the room stood a young woman who looked no older than 24. Her name was Nia Carter. Nia was the newest intern in the company. She had dark, thoughtful eyes and a calm face that carried both determination and a quiet kind of patience. The kind of patience that comes from growing up hearing elders say, "Stay steady, child. Life reveals people slowly." At the head of the table stood a man in his late 50s named Leonard Whitmore. His hair was silver and neatly combed back. His suit was expensive and perfectly tailored. Leonard had spent more than 30 years building his reputation in the corporate world. People often said he carried the confidence of a man who believed the room belonged to him. And on that morning he certainly behaved that way. He held a cup of hot coffee in his hand while several executives watched the young intern standing before them. The meeting had started with tension already hanging in the air. Someone had accused Nia of making a mistake in a financial report the night before. Leonard believed the mistake had embarrassed him in front of investors. So now he wanted answers. Nia stood quietly while the room watched. She had barely slept the night before trying to double-check the numbers. But she knew the report was correct. Her grandmother used to tell her something when she was a little girl sitting on the porch in summer evenings. If your truth is strong, you do not need to shout. You just stand steady. Leonard stepped closer. His voice carried a sharp edge. He asked her if she understood the damage she had done. Nia spoke calmly. She said she believed the report was accurate. Some of the executives exchanged looks. The security officers standing beside her shifted their weight slightly. Leonard smiled in a way that did not carry kindness. It carried pride. He raised the coffee cup slightly and said something that made a few people in the room uncomfortable. He said young interns sometimes needed to learn lessons the hard way. Then, before anyone could react, he tilted the cup. Hot coffee poured over the top of Nia's head. The dark liquid ran through her hair and down the front of her white blouse. It dripped slowly onto the polished conference room floor. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. The sound of coffee dripping was the only noise anyone heard. Nia closed her eyes briefly. Not out of anger, but out of something older and deeper. Something learned from a lifetime of quiet strength. Across the table, an older executive named Martin Delgado shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Martin was 62. He had seen a lot in business over the years. And something about the moment felt wrong in a way he could not ignore. Nia opened her eyes again. Her voice when she spoke was calm. Almost gentle. She simply said, "Is there anything else you would like to say, Mr. Whitmore?" Leonard chuckled. He believed he had made his point. He set the empty coffee cup on the table and walked toward the door. The meeting ended quickly after that. Nia quietly left the room. Some of the executives looked embarrassed. Others looked away. Martin Delgado remained seated for several minutes after everyone else left. He stared at the empty coffee cup. Then he slowly stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the city stretched wide and busy beneath the morning sky. Martin had spent 4 decades watching how people treated power. And he knew something most young executives never learned. Moments like this had consequences. Hours passed. The office returned to its usual rhythm. Phones ringing. Printers humming. Employees walking through long, quiet hallways. Leonard Whitmore sat comfortably in his private office reviewing documents. He felt satisfied. To him, the situation had been handled. Young employees needed discipline. At least that was what he believed. But just after 3 in the afternoon, an email appeared on his screen. It was marked urgent. Mandatory board meeting at 4. Leonard frowned slightly. He had not scheduled any meeting. Still, he walked confidently toward the same conference room where the morning incident had taken place. When he entered, every seat at the table was filled. Executives, board members, even a few representatives from corporate headquarters. And standing at the front of the room, was Nia Carter. Except now she looked different. Her hair was clean and tied neatly back. She wore a dark professional jacket. And beside her stood two senior members of the corporate board. Leonard paused near the doorway. Confusion slowly crossed his face. Nia looked toward him calmly. Her voice carried quiet authority. She asked him to take a seat. The room remained silent. Leonard slowly sat down. Then one of the board members spoke. A woman in her early 60s named Patricia Langston. Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had led companies for decades. She explained something Leonard had not known. The company had recently been preparing a leadership transition. The board had quietly begun placing trusted representatives inside different departments. Nia Carter was not simply an intern. She was a corporate governance observer working directly with the board. Her role was to study leadership culture inside the company before final executive restructuring. Several people around the table shifted uncomfortably. Leonard stared at Nia. His confident smile had disappeared. Patricia continued speaking. She said the events of the morning had been carefully reviewed. Security cameras recorded everything. And witnesses had already submitted statements. Nia stepped forward slightly. Her voice remained calm and steady. She said leadership was not measured by how loudly someone spoke, or how powerful they believed themselves to be. Leadership was measured by how people treated others when they believed nobody could challenge them. The words settled into the quiet room. Many of the older executives sitting there understood exactly what she meant. Because life had taught them the same lesson long ago. Nia looked directly at Leonard. There was no anger in her eyes. Only calm certainty. She explained that the board had already voted. Effective immediately. Leonard Whitmore was removed from his position. The room remained still. For a moment Leonard looked like a man who had just woken from a long dream. Security officers stepped quietly toward him. But they did not rush him. He slowly stood. For the first time in many years. He looked uncertain. Before leaving the room he glanced once more toward Nia. She simply nodded politely. Hours earlier he had poured coffee on a young woman he believed had no voice. Now that same woman had spoken with the authority of the entire board behind her. After Leonard left, the tension slowly eased. Several executives breathed deeply. Martin Delgado smiled faintly. He had seen enough years to know. Life has a quiet way of balancing things. Nia thanked the board and prepared to leave the room. But Martin approached her near the door. He spoke in a gentle voice. He said something his own father had told him decades earlier. Respect is the one investment that always returns interest. Nia smiled softly. She said her grandmother used to say something similar. They shared a small moment of understanding. The kind that comes when people from different generations recognize the same truth. Later that evening, the office grew quiet again. Sunset light warmed the windows. Employees slowly headed home. And Nia stood alone for a moment looking out across the city. She knew the day had been difficult. But she also knew something important. Change rarely comes with loud applause. Sometimes it arrives through quiet courage. Through patience. Through standing steady even when others expect you to fall. For many listeners who have lived long enough to see how life truly works, the lesson feels familiar. Kindness travels far. Respect matters. And the way we treat others when we believe nobody is watching often becomes the story people remember most. Thank you for spending this time with the Black Voices. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support helps keep these meaningful stories alive for listeners who believe in dignity, wisdom, and the power of human connection.